Stand right here
Yeah,
in front of the camera.
Hold on to this. I have to adjust this so you all can have the benefit of my full face. That was a joke. Hey, folks, welcome to the Dilworth Rotary Club. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. And I am especially grateful for our speaker. Our speaker is the Assistant Special Agent in Charge for the FBI here in Charlotte. And his name is Jason Kaplan. I say that I'm really grateful that he's here because Jason really only had about a day and a half's notice of this speech. We had a cancellation, a late cancellation from our scheduled speaker. And I called the Charlotte office, and ASAC Kaplan made himself available. He was actually at the firearms range this morning, and then changed and got here. And we certainly appreciate you being here. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jason. He was born and raised in Mexico City, Mexico. He spent 7 years working as a Virginia State Trooper and resigned at the rank of sergeant to begin his career with the FBI. He entered on duty with the FBI in January of 2004. And from 2004 through 2011, he was assigned to the New York field office, where he specialized in dismantling transnational gangs. ASAC Kaplan is an experienced police diver and was a senior instructor for the FBI Underwater Search and Evidence Recovery Team. In February 2011, ASAC Kaplan was promoted as a program coordinator for the FBI National Gang Task Force in Washington, D.C. In November 2013, ASAC Kaplan was promoted to a senior supervisory position as the legal attaché, we call them legats, in San Salvador, and covered all FBI matters in Northern Central America. Those legal attachés are essential to FBI international operations. We've got about 63 of them, I think, throughout the world, and we simply can't do our jobs around the globe without the assistance of those legats who have outstanding liaison with the police departments that they work with there. And of course, they work with our consular officials in the embassies, and they have to work very closely with them. ASAC Kaplan was also the acting attaché in Havana, Cuba, after the reopening of the U.S. Embassy there. In July 2016, he was selected as the supervisor and program coordinator for the Violent Crimes Against Children program, human trafficking and civil rights programs at the Charlotte field office. ASAC Kaplan supervised an experienced team of special agents, detectives, and dedicated professional staff who worked to rescue victims and help make North Carolina and the United States more secure for his efforts. In May 2021, ASAC Kaplan was selected as ASAC Charlotte, where he currently oversees the intelligence and administrative programs for the FBI in the entire state of North Carolina, encompassing all 3 judicial districts. He is one of 3 ASACs in our office here. And again, I just want to thank you profusely, sir, for taking the time to be here with us today on such short notice. I want to give him a huge round of applause right now. Yeah.
Sure.
Great.
I'll switch with you, Kevin. Thank
Yes.
you so much. I'll grab that from you.
Get out of your way.
What a great introduction. It makes it hard to be humble when you're as great as I am.
I say that all the time, Dave.
But I see your 2 boys there. I have 2 boys, and let me tell you, as cool as that sounds, thank you for that great introduction. My kids don't think I'm that cool. It's somehow dads are just not that cool. And I have a long story about how their mom was reading them a book when they were really young, and the protagonist in that book was an FBI agent. And I remember watching them as she was reading this, and they're, wow, they looked at each other and they said, his dad's an FBI agent in this. I think the book was Hoot, which is about a Disney book. And I'm like, guys, your dad's an FBI agent. No, it's not the same. It's not the same. So really, thank you very much. And I will say that a little bit more about that introduction is that, I always get a little bit bashful when I hear it. It does sound very impressive, but I will just spend a minute just talking about our former SAC here, if you don't know, I expect you do, was an SAC here in Charlotte. And we were just trading stories about what a what an honor is the right word to use, and how proud both of us were to have been given this opportunity to serve this community and serve North Carolina. And for those of you who don't know, Charlotte is the only office I would say runs a comparison out of the 56 field offices is probably maybe Tampa. Charlotte is the most sought after office in the FBI. And I won't spend too much time talking about it, but part of it has to do with the communities in North Carolina, what a wonderful place it is for families to grow up. The fact that you have mountains on one side and then you've got the ocean on the other. You don't necessarily get wildfires. You don't necessarily get winter storms that freeze you out. You don't have hurricanes beating you up all the time. And so when I was promoted just only about 2 months ago, I competed with 30 other candidates for this position, maybe the most that had put in an ASAC job in 10 years. I don't know, maybe other than WFO, which is the most popular. So I think that the reason why I highlight that is that you, amongst your members, you have somebody who also has an impressive resume. I don't know that you've ever seen it, but when somebody calls me, like a Stacey Ward, and says, Jason, any chance you can speak tomorrow at last minute? I know you're busy. It's an automatic yes. And then, in all fairness, I actually sabotaged your original speaker to get this opportunity. I apologize. It's not very sporty of me to do that, but
Weapons grade Delta.
whatever it takes to get a little bit of time. So what I thought I would do, if it's okay with you, is I would speak for probably about 10 minutes talking about the FBI in a broad sense, and maybe talk about some of the changes that are occurring. Obviously, the FBI is an incredibly large organization. It's uniformly considered to be the premier law enforcement organization in the world. And I can at least speak from some experience being overseas for many, many years, representing the FBI at embassies, working with other partners. It really is true to its name. And it's changed a lot. It's changed a lot since you were there, of course. In fact, I think that back when you were an agent, wearing a polka dotted tie was strictly forbidden by any supervisor. It was not allowed, but my wife still dresses me in the morning and she says, that's the tie that you're wearing. I don't argue with it, and I go with it. But so let's talk a little bit about the FBI. Traditionally, before September 11th, I think we understood that the FBI had a long tradition of working things that we understood when we watched shows on TV, or we saw that they were working traditional criminal matters. And September 11th occurred, and we saw the FBI take a dynamic shift in its prioritization. And I think one thing that the FBI is known for is not just being law enforcement, but also being an intelligence organization that collects a lot of intelligence. That is part of the recipe of success for the FBI. And that became even more apparent after 9/11, when we understood that there were some serious gaps in the way we were collecting information and sharing it with our partners. And so that was something that we decided to address. And I think it's been very effective. So we still work all the stuff we used to work, right? The bank robberies, we still work them. The violent crime, gangs, narcotics smuggling. We have a large white collar crime investigative component. So that's the stuff we've always known. And then we have this counterterrorism and counterintelligence mission that's over the last 20 years. It's the anniversary of September 11th, 20 years is, we're looking at this. What has changed? Well, it's been an incredible amount of resources and where I am also a taxpayer, our taxpayer funds going to make sure that we're protected from these international terrorism organizations. And so where are we now with the FBI? What's changed in the last 20 years? I described what changed before that. I think you don't have to be a genius. If you watch the news, you can see that some of the priorities for the FBI, particularly this year, that have changed are a greater insistence on understanding what the domestic terrorism threat is. And I think that seems reasonable for most people to understand that international terrorism is still going to be a priority for us, but we are spending more energy looking at what are some of the threats that we have from within our country and how can that potentially harm us. The FBI's mission is principally to protect to defend the Constitution and to protect the people of the United States of America. And then another two pieces that are becoming a premier focus for the FBI include cyber. This has become a huge challenge. Charlotte, the city of Charlotte in particular, but Raleigh also. These are two hubs that have huge banking industries, as we're well aware of, and also a lot of higher education institutions here. Additionally, I'll add, we have several large military installations here, large military presence. And so for us, the idea that we all experience it. I don't know about you guys, but I did spend some time early in the morning searching for gas when the Colonial Pipeline interruption occurred. Actually, side note, one morning I found a gas station that had gas. It was early. I got there, I'm filling up, and the guy filling up across from me, another supervisor from the FBI, just coincidentally, I'm like, Brian, he's our cyber supervisor. I'm like, you're like 20 minutes from your house. He's like, it's the only gas I could find. That's an example of how our infrastructure is being threatened by some of these cyber actors. So a big emphasis on cyber attacks and how we go about responding to them, because the only thing I'll say without getting into anything too sensitive is you have cyber attacks that we're aware of. There are offensive capabilities to sort of counter those, but is that an act of war? If there's a government state that's infiltrating or disrupting our infrastructure with computer systems and software, if we launch an offensive capability against them and destroy their electronic capabilities on their side. So it's these kinds of conversations are taking place at a very high level within our government. And they're very difficult questions to answer. Are we willing to, go to war over some of these cyber things? And those are the questions that are being answered. And the FBI plays a huge role in that. And then the last thing I'll talk about in regards to sort of the way the FBI is changing is civil rights. Civil rights has always been a big focus of the FBI. And it is fair to say that all of us understand that civil rights right now in our country are being looked at in a new way. And the way we as law enforcement agencies engage with the communities are being sort of assessed. I'm very proud of the role that Director Ray has taken in ensuring that we play a vital role in helping law enforcement organizations like the Virginia State Police I used to belong to and Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department find ways to change the way we engage with our communities and potentially to reform the way we conduct our law enforcement operations. I think it's just part of the conversation. I can assure you the SAC and I talk about this on a regular basis. It's very high on his priority list to make sure that we're engaged with different organizations, different communities within North Carolina to make sure that we have an understanding of how do they feel? Do they feel that they have trust with law enforcement, that they can come forward and make these, let us know when there are things that are occurring in their community. So I think that civil rights is a very great priority. So an expression that I just threw out briefly when we were to the SAC, when we were talking about this was, when you make everything a priority, then nothing's a priority. And so it becomes very difficult for us now that I'm at, in the front office and at an executive level in this office to discuss how is it that we're going to leverage our limited resources to help. We have violent crime that may be increasing, but if we're going to fight civil rights and we're going to violations and we're going to fight cyber, do we need to take a body from that investigative body or that analytical body and move them over here? And that brings me to sort of this a little bit more specific about what my role is. As we mentioned, there are 3 assistant supervisory agent charge in here, and I'm one of them. And I think they mentioned that my role is administrative and intel. So, my kids made fun of me when they said, wait a minute, Dad. So we have a criminal ASAC, a national security ASAC, and then an admin intel ASAC, and you're the admin intel ASAC. What they don't understand is that I love this job. And it is in a large part administrative. I do have some RAs like Greensboro that's extremely operational, very busy. But the reason why I want to bring it up is that what I said to my kids, I said, guys, when you're on a roller coaster, so keep in mind, I've had 25 years, you read my bio, SWAT teams, dive teams, running operations internationally in Northern Central America, which was wild. So have you ever gotten off of a roller coaster and then your feet are on the ground again, or like a bumpy flight and then you get off that flight? That is how I feel now. My phone's not blowing up at 3 a.m. anymore. We're not I'm very proud of the history I have with rescuing children here in North Carolina. My kid said, if you Google my name, you'll see something about that. The important thing is the FBI, the reason why it's so successful is we go beyond just the operations part. It's admin. So I deal with fleet management, and did the building get pressure washed every 2 years like it's supposed to? All this nonsense. I love it. I know it's boring, but I love it. But the other piece that I'm really proud of is the intel piece. And we have a cadre of analysts in Charlotte and throughout the FBI that are just brilliant. And they are incredibly not only, I won't say valuable, they are just absolutely critical to our success in that mission of protecting the Constitution, defending the Constitution and protecting the American people. And what does that look like? I always want to try to explain to people what it looks like. An analyst sits right next to those agents. Hey, how's it going? Sits right next to the agents and works with the agents to sort of apply their subject matter expertise to help the agents. Because it truly is, as proud as I am of the agents and the way they do interviews and the way they conduct themselves, in the end, you're only as good as the team around you. And so really the FBI model is to find incredible agents, and I'll spend a little bit of time recruiting because that's a huge push for us. I know some of you guys are probably older than the minimum age of 37, but maybe you have family members who might be interested. So I will take my opportunity to plug the FBI here for recruitment. Yeah, there you go. I like it. But it is the way that we build our investigative teams is part of the success. And I think one of the things that we're seeing in law enforcement is we're seeing other agencies, for example, CMPD, an incredibly professional organization that we have an incredibly good working relationship with. I've had CMPD detectives working for me for 5 years that I've been here. Technically, they still do, but those detectives and the quality of their work being married up with the FBI's mission has been extremely successful here. And what I was going to say was we see CMPD is very forward-leaning when it comes to the analytical piece. They have an understanding of how valuable those analysts are. So even in my human trafficking task force that I just left, although it's still there, being run well, we have an analyst from CMPD who sits next to a CMPD detectives to help us fight and combat human trafficking. Very rare to see a law enforcement agency willing to commit an employee who's an analyst. We've done it for many years with investigative bodies, but to have an analyst come help us is really valuable. So I think that those are sort of the principal ways that I've seen the FBI changing. I'll talk a little bit about recruitment and diversity. The FBI has a lot of guys who look like me, and it is a problem, unfortunately. As great as my bio sounds and as awesome as I am and as good a job as I'm going to do, we have to bring in people from different communities. Now, in all fairness, when I was being interviewed for this job, I did highlight the fact I was born in Mexico. I lived in foreign countries. I'm fluent in Spanish. So there is some diversity about me. But the truth is, in the United States, one of the things that makes the United States as great in a country as it is the diversity. Doesn't mean we don't have, it's also what makes it so challenging for this country to be successful because we have so much diversity. But the FBI is stronger the more diverse it becomes. And we've become acutely aware of that. And there's a lot of energy that's being put into recruitment. That is one of the responsibilities that falls under me as the admin ASAC is human resources, recruitment. And we really would like to see, a more diverse population within the agent population. So the numbers are roughly something like about 48% of the FBI is female. So that's about 35,000 employees within the FBI. So we're doing okay with that, but the agent number is much lower than that. With minorities, people who self-identify as a minority, we're running somewhere in the 14 to 15%, and that's just not sufficient. That is not representative of what the communities that we're designed to protect are. And so we have a lot of tools that are available to young teenagers, like a teen academy that Stacey Ward runs, which is magnificent, where teenagers from high schools are able to participate. They come to the FBI building, they get to meet FBI agents, they get to see some of the tools that we use when we do our investigations. And then we also have a Citizens Academy. And the Citizens Academy is a really great opportunity for people in the community, organizations like the Rotary Club and other organizations that we believe would be beneficial to come into the FBI to see what the FBI kind of sort of personalize the FBI, take a little peek behind the veil. We want to open our organization up to our communities to understand that despite the fact that we deal with some very sensitive matters and there are things that are secretive, for the most part, we are not a secretive organization. People will come up to me for the last 17 years that I've been an agent, and I'll say, "Oh, I work for the FBI," and they'll say, "Oh, are you allowed to tell me that?" Well, the answer is yes. If not, I just made a mistake. But I think the question, there is a mystique about the FBI and the secretive nature of it, and there is a role to play for some things that are top. I do have, top secret clearance, and there is a time to do that. But the truth is, a lot of the work that we do is engage with the community. It's source development. We cannot function successfully without having informants and sources that work for us that we've developed trust with, who give us information about what's going on in the world, in the country. And that is a part of the reason that we feed that with our partners. So we say, hey, we think that there's going to be, an attack at this location in Baghdad, or we think that there's going to be a robbery that might occur next week in Cincinnati. That is a big part of the way the FBI operates. And so with that being said, I think what I'd like to do is sort of open the floor a little bit to some questions. I think it was I sort of got a little bit shotgun approach to the different topics, but I have another 10 or 15 minutes and I'd be happy to take questions. If there's something that you're particularly concerned about or curious, we'll take it. Yes, ma'am.
I'm thinking about your time in Cuba when they opened up the embassy there. What has happened since, and what the attacks that have been unable to be located?
That's a great question. Somebody just asked me about that. Interestingly enough, it was in the summer of 2016 when those attacks. I was there when those attacks were occurring, and I am part of the group of people that are being canvassed regularly about symptoms to see if I'm feeling any of the symptoms from there. So I can tell you that I don't believe, based on the questions that I've been asked about, that I was affected by that. Now that may have something to do with the fact that I was not there for an extended period of time because I was still covering some of my duties in El Salvador. So I was really there for weeks at a time and then back. So where that investigation results, I'll be honest with you, I'm not privy to it. It's not something that other than them periodically asking me how I'm feeling, an email goes to a large group of people. Now, some of the questions, I'll be honest with you, are you noticing, that are you forgetful and your short-term memory? And then my wife just laughs and just says, "You've got to be kidding me. You've been suffering." Right. I said, "Honey, it's the attacks. It's this mysterious attack. It's not my fault. I forgot to bring the laundry up or take the garbage out." She's like, "You've been doing this for 23 years. I know you." But what I would like to talk about, which it is probably, not only was it an honor to be asked to do that because it was extremely sensitive. So what I was told when I debriefed with the CIA or when I briefed before I traveled was that I was the first FBI agent who traveled to Cuba, declared, meaning that the government knew I was an FBI agent. I'm not going to opine as to whether there were agents there previously, but it wouldn't have been openly declared on their passport. So I traveled on my official passport, which means that they knew that there was an FBI agent in their country. And I think that they have a very aggressive intelligence, apparatus. And so they expected that I would be followed and those things. And in fact, when I was in Langley, it was a very serious meeting. I don't think this is sensitive. I can talk about this now. There was like 4 or 5 FBI agents sitting on one side of the table, maybe 4 or 5 CIA intel folks on the other side of the table. And they were explaining to me, because I'm kind of a knuckle dragging former trooper, gang investigator, diver. I'm not really sophisticated. So they're going to help me be ready for this new adventure to go into Cuba when the administration had just opened the embassy. And they said that one of the techniques, and I don't think it's too sensitive, that the intel will use is that they might have a beautiful woman approach you when you're out at dinner and try to sort of strike up a conversation with you and, pay special attention to you. And my response was, but it is possible they're not working for the Cuban government. And in all fairness, they don't know me because I'm kind of a jokester. So they were dead serious and they kind of continued on. The people in the FBI, they know me and they all knew I was kidding. And they're very serious over in Langley. And it took them a good, I would say 60 full seconds. I think I had to repeat it. I said, but it's an island with 6 million people. It is possible. And somebody's not being paid to talk to me, right?
Or she just wants your liver.
Right, exactly. Or they just want to steal one of my organs. So I think that, the experience there, the role I had, I'll shut up about it because I get very excited about it. But the role that I had was really just to engage with the government on nothing crazy, really just criminal matters, right? Some cyber stuff, crimes against children, which I was a subject matter expert at, and talking about how as their economy grows and as they try to open their economy, and the tourism that our analysts have an expectation that there could be an increase in some horrible crimes like sex tourism and things like that, where people will come there to take advantage of young kids. And their response was really interesting. I don't mind sharing, and I've told this story numerous times, so I found it intriguing. Coming from a 25 years as a law enforcement officer in a country such as ours, I'm not suggesting that our judicial process is perfect, but it is a very good system. It tries to be fair. It's unfair, but it is stacked against law enforcement to find somebody guilty. And what I mean by that is our system is essentially designed to let 99 criminals go free to prevent one innocent person from being put in jail. And when you think about it in those terms, it's part of the reason why it's so difficult for us to prosecute people. It should be difficult. We should welcome that challenge. We should not make it easy to put people in jail. Now let's fast forward to the people I'm talking to in a totalitarian dictatorship for, since the 1950s and 60s, where their system of law enforcement is extremely different, as you can imagine. For them, for me, if I want to search your phone or if I want to listen to your phone calls, I have to start with this progression of the least intrusive investigative method. And I have to work my way to where I can basically tell a judge that I have probable cause to believe that the only way for me to collect sufficient evidence to put this person in jail is if I tap their phone or read their email. It is an extremely difficult threshold. Cuba doesn't have that problem. Cuba has a centralized banking system. If they want your financial records, if there's a law enforcement investigator who wants to get your financial records, they don't need to ask anybody for it. They simply just go get it. So I could talk a lot longer about it, but just to give you an idea of how unique an experience that was for me to be the lead of a table of 20 US government entities across from 20 to 30, because 10 of them were Intel people for Cuba, and just have this dialogue where they are explaining to me that we don't tolerate child, abuse. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, we don't tolerate it either. It was just a very strange exchange, but a great experience. So thanks for asking. Yeah.
How do you interact with the CIA in terms of cybercrime, especially with the hacking of the pipeline? When does it become their job and when is it your job?
That's a great question.
Interesting because it's happening overseas, but
right.
It's happening on US soil. So
yeah, lots of opportunities for us to get sort of frustrated with each other for sure, because of this omnipresent crossing of jurisdictions and borders and roles. I think the best way to describe it is that we have essentially task forces or working groups where we embed each other. We have agents at Langley, and they have people that work with us closely here. Even though we may be here in Charlotte, it is possible that there may be a foreign influence or something that they have collection on over there. So I think the best way to describe it is HSI also plays the Homeland Security investigations, plays a large role in the cyber sort of realm. And generally the best way, I think this is oversimplistic, and my cyber supervisor, who I was pumping gas next to a few months ago, would probably be upset to hear me say it, but effectively the infrastructure security protection piece, a lot of that will fall with HSI. As you mentioned, CIA will be focused on sort of that external collection and how that helps us internally. And then the FBI is essentially leveraged once a crime has been committed or an attack has been identified. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So think of security in your house and saying, well, what security do I have for my home? And you're like, okay, maybe it's like CPI or something. Like, okay, CPI has cameras on my driveway. They have an alarm system on my front door. That may be sort of a way to describe HSI's role. They're assessing, and we help them, of course, but we're assessing what are our vulnerabilities, how do we protect them? And then you're like, hey, someone just broke into my house, or they took over one of my cameras, and now they're viewing my kitchen without my permission. So they've intruded into my systems and my home, quite frankly. So now I need somebody to help me with that investigation. That would be something that the FBI would handle. And then if we found out that that person was somebody from Russia, then it's possible that we would then sort of, once again, our legat would be invaluable or in Moscow, but that legat in Moscow sits with the FBI agents or with the CIA agents that might or may not be in the embassy there. And they would say, hey, this is something that happened over there. It's a group that we've identified. We already know who they are. They've attacked 48 other people in, the United States. We see them as, are they state sanctioned? So I don't know if that answers your question, but there's sort of, we understand different roles. The thing I'll throw out, and you know this well, is I'm not sure that we all agree on what our roles are. That's my interpretation. It's very likely that another agency will say, that's not true. We do it all. And that becomes a problem. That's where being diplomatic pays off.
And does cybercrime, are the laws keeping up to be able to prosecute people who are breaking cyber rules, or there really aren't rules? But
no. I mean, the problem is, as when I work crimes against children and we dealt with my agents, we're dealing with a lot of new apps that kids are talking to people on and all that stuff. I talk to a lot of PTA groups and answer a lot of questions of parents and children. And I talk to like middle schools, and they don't think I'm that funny, by the way. I learned that early, but the parents maybe, but I'm just too old. But I would often say, parents, the number one question I think parents would ask is like, what apps are safe? What can I do? And then I would just say, look, if I know about it, it's dead. My kids have highlighted that. Oh, Dad, Discord. All right, we're moving somewhere else. Dad figured it out. And so I think it's one of those things where the laws are very, once again, we have a robust process for, enacting laws, and that is not a good way to sort of stay nimble and be able to stay up with it. So yeah, a lot of our intrusion cases that we do, we may identify a subject, we may identify a group that's conducting attacks. And then we have to forget the international piece. That gets really complicated too. But even in country, if we identify somebody who's hacking, what are we going to charge them with? Does the federal government have a serious punishment for somebody who's doing that? We do have laws, by the way, but they're extremely hard to prove. The burden of proof is difficult. And so a lot of times, as you know, like what we'll end up doing is finding a different charge that might be a little bit lower level that's easier to prove. We'll just have somebody plead guilty to that. Yes.
I've volunteered with church groups over the years that dealt with human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on what you read, Charlotte, North Carolina is always in the top 10, 6th, 7th, 8th ranked in the country, the worst. And when the U.S. Attorney General came here some years ago and informed us that the Beltway in Atlanta and Charlotte was the number one widely used Beltway in the Eastern United States for human trafficking. And here you mentioned it earlier. What is it that you can tell us as far as what we need to be paying attention to as we're out and about to be able to be helpful to someone that may be a victim of that?
That's a great question.
I help you, Charlotte, to reduce that number.
That's a great question, and that's my wheelhouse. Oh, thank you. Yeah, Shelley Lynch, our PIO, she always reminds me about that. And I always forget. So the question essentially is that what can I talk a little bit about when it comes to human trafficking in the Charlotte area that might be helpful to you guys, that might help, prevent somebody from being victimized. And this is something that I worked for 5 years as a supervisor here because that was my group. Two things I'll address. You also referenced the fact that Charlotte is very high on the list of human trafficking cities, or the state of North Carolina is high on the sort of national ranking of human trafficking as a problem. I have a long answer for this, and I don't have the time to be full, but I'm going to give you two pieces. One is I'm very dubious of that sort of the notion that is worse here than it is in other cities. The way those numbers are collected, some of it has to do with complaints that are being made to Polaris, which is a national organization, and that Polaris is looking at the number and say, oh, Charlotte has. To me, as a guy who speaks on human trafficking for the last 5 years, I might argue that it's just I'm doing a really good job of educating the community of what it looks like. So now they're complaining. I don't mean complaining, but rather filing a complaint and saying, hey, I think there's a victim of human trafficking. Whereas another part of the country, they don't have an understanding of what it looks like and therefore aren't actually complaining to the right authorities. So does Charlotte have a human trafficking problem? Does North Carolina have a human trafficking problem? Absolutely, they do. Is it worse than it is in any other sort of major metropolitan state? I don't think so. As far as your question about the interstate system and the role that plays with human trafficking, I would say that is certainly true. That's a factor, just like it is for any type of commerce, right? Drug dealing, buying new tires, whatever it is. If there's an interstate and there's cities that are connected, we're going to see an increase in some type of activity. Roanoke's a little out of the way. You might have to kind of take a circuitous route to get there. It may not have as big a problem. To answer the question about how to help with human trafficking, there is something I'd like to share with you to sort of help you understand what it is. Because a lot of people, we've done a very good job of bringing the fear of human trafficking to the community. And often you'll see posters about stop human trafficking in its tracks, and there's a girl who's chained up or being thrown into a shipping container. That is absolutely the worst case of human trafficking. And yes, that does occur. The problem I have with that sensationalization of human trafficking is that it overlooks what is much more common. And human trafficking is much more commonly somebody who is from a underprivileged home, who is looking potentially for somebody to pay attention to them, who hasn't been explained to them what a healthy relationship looks like. And so it really, the people who are exploiting these victims, typically the victim believes it's a boyfriend or somebody who cares about them, and that they're doing this, having, sex for money and doing that type of thing because they love that person or that person has their interest. And it really is because they just haven't. I'm not a psychologist, but I've seen this victimology for many years. So what I would say is the best way to fight human trafficking, in my opinion, and have the greatest effect is to really, just like you would fight drug addiction, just like you would fight some, teens from running away from home and all the dangers that come from running away from home, which human trafficking is one of them. It really is talking to people about this. This is a problem that could happen to anyone. And it isn't that you're going to be snatched up from some parking lot at the mall. It's more likely what's going to happen is you're going to meet someone who you think has your best interests in mind, but in fact, they don't. In fact, they're interested in making money, and they see you as a sort of a vessel to be able to get them money. So I'll do one more question, and I'm afraid I have to run. Can I just check? I hate to ignore my virtual panel. If there's no questions on the virtual, okay. Taylor, go ahead.
Yes. Hey, so thanks for talking. So quick background, before I started doing nonprofit work, I was a researcher in human trafficking for 10 years. So I really appreciate you addressing the ideal victim issues that we always hear about and see. I'm interested, since you've been working here in North Carolina, how has your experience been with working with local law enforcement to work on this issue? I did most of my research in Atlanta, and it was always rocky. And so I'm just interested, what is it like here in Charlotte with the FBI and local law enforcement?
I'll be honest with you, that's an incredibly astute question. It is one of the biggest challenges that we've had. I would say that it's been over 5 years, I've seen a lot of progress. But one of the things that, as a supervisor working human trafficking, one of the biggest frustrations for me and for my agents, and as you know, for local law enforcement, is many times we're not accustomed to dealing with victims who don't even know that they're victims. So a lot of our energy, and we have victim specialists who are incredible resource to help. Imagine you have a crime that's committed, somebody's a victim, and they don't even understand it. So that is part of it. And what you're referring to, Taylor, for the rest of the audience, is without that education of your law enforcement officials, who are the investigators, who are the first responders, a lot of times it may just look like prostitution or something like that. And then say, well, hey, are you a victim? You're like, no, I'm not a victim. I'm doing what I want to do. It can't be that simple. And so they walk away and they leave these victimized people out there without this sort of education piece. So the answer to your question is, I think if I was going to bring some of my analysts in and draw a heat map about it doesn't exist, by the way, but a heat map showing sort of the nuanced approach, well-trained approach to combating human trafficking versus sort of the old school, not aware of these things. You probably could look at your more cosmopolitan or metropolitan areas of North Carolina and start drawing that map outward. And you would see that as it goes away from sort of the larger cities, the larger towns, it becomes less and less successful when it comes to that. I will say CMPD, I'm very proud of the work that CMPD does with human trafficking. So
Thank you, Jason.
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. And we have a little old school mug gift for you.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you guys. Thank you so much. All right. Sorry.
Thank you,
I'm
Jason.
sorry I have to run.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank
No
you.
problem. Anytime. Yeah, sure. Thank you guys. All right.
Let me adjust the height here. All right. And Jason, you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, thank you so much, guys. I'm sorry I have to run.
Thank you.
Jason, your gun's out.
Oh,
Your gun showing.
all right, we got there. I love it.
For those on Zoom, Jason's gun was out of his jacket. So it's a little like, we're so cool. Hopefully they don't have a concealed carry thing or no concealed carry here at Dilworth.
I can carry that.
Except in Zoe's kitchen, they do not allow concealed carry in Zoe's
It doesn't
kitchen.
matter.
Yeah. That's true, FBI. They get to do whatever they want. So we're going to switch now to the other camera because let's go back to